The morning of June 20th, 2001 began like any other Tuesday morning in the Clear Lake neighborhood of Houston, Texas. A quiet suburb built in the shadow of the Johnson Space Center, where the streets are wide and the houses sit behind their neat lawns in the heavy Gulf Coast heat. The kind of neighborhood where the fathers are engineers and the mothers keep the homes and the children ride their bikes on the sidewalk and nobody locks their doors because nothing bad ever happens here. Beachcomber Lane looked like safety that morning. It looked like ordinary American life. But inside the house at 942 Beachcomber Lane, something dark had already finished its work. A 36-year-old woman named Andrea Yates picked up the phone at 9:48 in the morning and dialed 911. Her voice was calm, completely calm. The kind of calm that the dispatcher on the other end of the line would later describe as the most unsettling thing she had ever heard in 20 years of taking emergency calls. She said 4 words. "I just killed my kids." No screaming, no sobbing, no trembling. 4 words, delivered in the flat, affectless tone of a person reporting a broken pipe. 4 words that would set in motion one of the most agonizing moral debates in the history of American justice. Inside that house, 5 children were dead. Noah, 7 years old. John, 5. Paul, 3. Luke, 2. And Mary, 6 months old, not yet old enough to hold her own head up. Their small shoes were still lined up by the front door, perfectly arranged, like any other morning. This is the story of Andrea Yates, and one of the most devastating questions the American court system has ever been forced to answer. What do you do with a woman who believed, with every cell of her broken mind, that killing her children was the most loving thing she had ever done? To understand what happened on that Tuesday morning, you have to go back. Back to the woman Andrea Kennedy was before any of this, because Andrea Kennedy was extraordinary, and that matters. And it is important not to lose that in everything that came after. She grew up in Houston, the youngest of 5 children in a close Catholic family, valedictorian of her high school class, captain of her swim team. She graduated from her nursing program near the top of her class and went to work in Houston hospitals, where her colleagues described her as precise, compassionate, and unfailingly patient. The kind of nurse who stayed past the end of her shift because a patient in room 4 was frightened and needed someone to sit with them a little longer. She was the kind of person the world needs more of. Everyone who knew her said so. She met Russell Yates in 1989 at a residential complex where they both lived. He was a systems engineer at NASA's Johnson Space Center, driven, organized, certain of himself in the way of men who have always had their plans work out exactly as intended. They married in April 1993, and then they started building their world. Russell had a vision for that world, and it was shaped in large part by a man named Michael Waroniecki, a radical evangelical street preacher who traveled the country with a megaphone and a stack of hand-printed pamphlets, delivering a message that was stark and uncompromising. The modern world was corruption. Television was sin. Public schools were poison. A woman's only purpose was complete submission to God, to her husband, to the bearing and raising of children. And a mother who failed in this purpose was not merely failing her family. She was condemning her children's souls to hell. Russell bought the pamphlets. He played the cassette tapes in the house. He pulled the children out of school to be homeschooled by Andrea. He sold the family home and moved everyone into a converted Greyhound bus for a period, to live more purely, closer to what he understood God to require. Andrea read every word Waroniecki wrote. He internalized it completely. The shame, the inadequacy, the relentless fear that no matter what she did, it was never enough, that her children's souls were in her hands and her hands were failing. 5 children in 7 years. Noah, John, Paul, Luke, and finally Mary. 5 children to feed, bathe, teach, nurse, and love, every day, largely alone, in a household built around the theology of a man who believed that maternal failure was a form of spiritual murder. What was building inside Andrea Yates during those years was invisible to almost everyone around her. It looked like exhaustion. It looked like ordinary struggle. It was not exhaustion. It was a mind being slowly, irreversibly dismantled. The first catastrophic breakdown came in 1999, after the birth of her 4th child. Andrea was found in the family home in a state her doctors would later describe as catatonic. She was scratching her own skin until it bled. She had stopped eating. She sat for hours staring at a point on the wall that no one else could see. She was hospitalized, diagnosed with severe postpartum depression with psychotic features, placed on antipsychotic medication. She stabilized. She came home. Her psychiatrist, Dr. Mohammed Saeed, was clear about what needed to happen next. His instructions were documented in her medical records. They were not ambiguous. Do not have another child. Andrea became pregnant again within months. Mary was born in November 2000. She was healthy. She was beautiful. And 3 weeks after her birth, Andrea stopped speaking entirely. She was admitted again. She told a nurse she was hearing voices, that she saw visions, that Satan had entered her children, that she was a terrible mother and her children were going to suffer forever because of her. She was discharged for the final time on May 14, 2001, 6 weeks before the murders. Her antipsychotic medication had just been discontinued. Her next appointment was weeks away. At her last visit, Dr. Saeed asked the question that appears on every psychiatric assessment form. Are you having any thoughts of harming yourself or your children? Andrea said no. She had already decided what she was going to do. What the prosecution at her trial worked very hard to prevent the jury from fully understanding is the specific nature of what was happening inside her mind. Postpartum psychosis is not postpartum depression. It is not sadness. It is a complete severance from reality. The brain, overwhelmed by the hormonal upheaval of childbirth compounded by genetics, isolation, sleep deprivation, and 5 consecutive pregnancies with no adequate recovery between them, loses its ability to distinguish what is real from what it is generating. The hallucinations are real. The voices are real. The delusions have the full weight of lived experience. And Andrea's delusion was this: she had been a bad mother. Woronieki's voice, absorbed over years of pamphlets and tapes, had told her so with the authority of God himself. Her children, raised by a mother as corrupt as she was, were already on the path to damnation. They were going to hell. All 5 of them. Because of her. But children who die before the age of moral accountability go to heaven. In Andrea's psychotic mind, this had become the architecture of a plan. She could save them. She could take them before the corruption became permanent. She would go to hell herself for it. She believed this explicitly and said so to investigators afterward. She was sacrificing her own soul to save theirs. In the ruins of Andrea Yates's mind, this was not murder. It was the last and greatest act of a mother's love. Russell left for work at 9 o'clock on the morning of June 20th. His mother was due to arrive at 10 to help with the children. He kissed Andrea goodbye in the pale morning heat. He backed down the driveway. He drove away down Beachcomber Lane and did not look back. Andrea watched the car disappear. Then she walked to the bathroom and turned on the tap. She began with the youngest, Mary, 6 months old, then Luke, then Paul, then John. She carried each child to the master bedroom after. She laid them on the bed with care. She arranged them. She covered them with a sheet, gently, the way a mother covers a sleeping child. Noah was last. He was 7 years old, and he was old enough to understand that something was terribly wrong. When he saw his mother coming down the hallway toward him, he ran, his bare feet on the linoleum, running through his own house away from his own mother. She caught him. At 9:48, she called 911. Then she called Russell at work. "You need to come home," she told him. "Why?" he asked. "It's time," she said. "I finally did it." Russell arrived before the ambulance. He ran to the bedroom. He pulled back the sheet. The first officer on the scene found Andrea sitting on the couch in the living room. Dry. Still. Her hands folded in her lap. She told him she had killed her children. She asked when her psychiatrist would arrive. She was not distressed. She was not relieved. She had done what she believed she had to do. And now she was waiting. The trial of Andrea Yates opened in February 2002 at the Harris County Courthouse, and it split the country in a way that few criminal cases ever have. Outside, protesters lined the courthouse steps every morning. Some carried signs that said "murderer." Others carried signs that said, "Sick, not evil." Cable news ran the footage on a loop. The prosecution built its case on deliberation. She knew right from wrong. She waited for Russell to leave. She acted systematically, one child after another. She covered the bodies. She called 911 herself. She had lied to her doctor weeks earlier about thoughts of harming her children. This was murder. 5 counts. The defense argued that Andrea Yates did not know that what she was doing was wrong. Not in the legal sense, not in the moral sense. In her mind, the only mind she had, the only reality available to her, she was saving her children from eternal damnation. The deliberation the prosecution pointed to was not evidence of sanity. It was evidence of how completely the psychosis had organized itself into a coherent, internally consistent, absolutely horrifying logic. The first jury convicted her. Life in prison. But in 2005, the conviction was overturned. A prosecution witness, Dr. Park Dietz, a forensic psychiatrist, had told the jury that a Law and Order episode depicting a mother who drowned her children and was found not guilty by reason of insanity had aired shortly before the murders, implying Andrea had been inspired by it and had planned her defense accordingly. The episode had never aired. He had fabricated it entirely. At the retrial in 2006, Andrea Yates was found not guilty by reason of insanity. She was committed to the North Texas State Hospital, where she remains today. Older now, medicated, lucid. She knows exactly what she did. She lives with it every single day. In the years after the verdict, certain things came to light that the courtroom never addressed. Russell Yates remarried in 2006, the same year as the retrial, and moved forward with his life. Michael Woroniecki, the preacher whose theology of maternal shame had been piped into that household for years, was never investigated, never questioned, never asked to account for the role his teachings played in the mind of a woman who was already fracturing. He continues his ministry to this day. Dr. Saeed, who had discharged a psychotic mother of 5 with discontinued medication and no adequate follow-up, had his license briefly suspended by the Texas Medical Board. Briefly. He continued practicing medicine. 5 children were dead, and not one person who had failed them spent a single day in custody. Noah Yates would have been 31 years old this year. John would have been 29. Paul, 27. Luke, 26. Mary, 23. They would have grown up, gone to school, fallen in love, built lives that spread out in directions no one could have predicted. They were real children with real futures, and every one of those futures was taken from them inside an hour on a Tuesday morning in June. The case changed things. It changed how American courts handle postpartum psychosis claims. It introduced millions of people to an illness most of them had never heard of. It forced hospitals to reconsider how they discharge high-risk postpartum patients. None of that brings back 5 children. What this case leaves behind is a question the law answered, and that philosophy never quite can. A woman whose mind had been dismantled by illness, by isolation, by theology, by a medical system that let her go too soon. That woman drowned her 5 children because she believed in every fiber of her broken mind that she was saving them. The law says not guilty by reason of insanity. The children are still gone. And every answer we reach about what Andrea Yates deserved has to hold both of those facts at the same time, without letting either one erase the other. Noah, John, Paul, Luke, Mary. They deserved better. From everyone. What do you think? Was Andrea Yates a victim of a broken system? Or does a mother who kills her 5 children belong behind bars, regardless of her mental state? Leave your verdict in the comments below. Subscribe to Family Crimes for a new case every week. Because the darkest secrets hide at home.